Now this is UHU Glue, a general purpose glue which has been used to make slime and goo effects for decades. But there's a new kid on the block. This is Dirty Down Snot. Now this stuff we recently looked at and we found that it is quite nice. It's an interesting product. But when I did that video reviewing this stuff and seeing what it can and what it can't do, one of the things I was most often asked is, how does it actually differ to this stuff? Well, today we're going to test these two together and see how they differ, and therefore which might be the best solution for you and your project. Okay, let's compare these two. Now, first of all, the price. Dirty Down Snot is going to cost a lot more than the UHU, but then again, to be fair, the UHU is an all-purpose adhesive. It is meant to be cheap. However, whilst it may be cheaper, it's only going to give you the value if it gives you the results that you're looking for. Right, so to get a comparable test, I'm going to use this piece of sprue. This has been primed in Tamiya surface primer, and then I've now painted the right hand side, this orangey yellow colour, for where we will use the UHU, and the white side to where I'm going to use the Dirty Down Snot. Right, so let's get started with the glue. Now, trying to get it out of the tube itself is a bit awkward, a bit fiddly, so I'm going to decant some of it onto a piece of grease-proof paper, and then simply dip the cocktail stick into it, touch it on one side, and try and stretch it across. Now, the effect we're going for today, we're trying to replicate with both of these two, is those strings of snotty goo. So to test these two products, I'm going to use a cocktail stick to apply the product to one side and then stretch it across ever increasing size of gaps. So even as we start this experiment, the UHU glue is stretching across the gaps quite nicely. However, it is a very, very fine, almost filament type effect. Even if I use a lot of glue on one side and it stretches across, then it really narrows down to almost like a hair-like thickness of that kind of drooly, kind of gooey bit. Okay, so now I've got the clear strands. Let's try mixing in a little bit of Scale 75 shrapnel red. Now this is kind of a browny red, so it could make quite an interesting Gore effect. Okay, so that is not really affecting the consistency of the glue at all. Well, not to a noticeable amount at least. Now what I have found with this stuff, it's quite tricky to use. It's very stringy, and lots of strings come off it, and it can be quite messy and a bit yucky to use. But what I have found is that you get little strings of the glue coming off everywhere, and it does go often in lots of places that you don't necessarily want it to go. This makes it quite messy to use, and if you're not careful, you can get it over parts of the model you weren't expecting it. Okay, so that's the UHU glue, and that wasn't what I was expecting, if I'm honest with you. So let's try out the Dirty Down Snot. Now, obviously, I have used this before in the previous video. Now, remember, I have kept the Dirty Down Snot at the same room temperature as the glue, but this is a lot thicker. Now, even if I put it across these small gaps, the effect is a much thicker, more glistening effect, because there's more goo holding in that strand than the almost wispy amounts from the glue. The thicker goop from the Dirty Down Snot it gives you much more of an effect. It's much more obvious. Also, because the strands are thicker, you get little air bubbles trapped within the goop, which then kind of add to that kind of slimy, wet effect. Right, so now let's mix in some of that shrapnel red into that Dirty Down Snot. Now this time, compared to previous tests, it is not gooing up and curing quite as quickly as it did before with the ink that I tried previously. It's a very different effect to the Dirty Down Gore. Right, so let's look at what we've got so far at this stage. Now, these have both had time to dry off a little bit, but the UHU glue seems to give you a much finer, more delicate looking, almost discreet effect compared to the Dirty Down Snot, which is much more bigger, thicker strands, bolder, and more gooey looking. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but they do seem to give very different results. Which is going to be right for you is going to be down to what you're looking for in your project. Now, especially if you're using these on tabletop miniatures, then strength and stability is going to be quite a significant factor. So therefore, I'm now going to leave these overnight let them dry completely, and then we can start testing how strong they are, how resilient the effect is. Okay, so it's now 24 hours later, and looking at them now, you really can see the differences between the two different products. But let's now see how tough and resilient these effects are. Now, if I use a gentle bit of pressure, you do get a bit of flex in the UHU glue. It's not completely brittle, which is quite reassuring. Now, if I apply the brush and just tap against the bigger strands, as well as some of the thinner strands, there's no give there at all. It's like as if it's made out of plastic. Of course, if you start throwing it around, I've no doubt it will start breaking. Okay, let's pressure test this a little bit. So if I even get a bottle of paint, if I lay it on top of the Dirty Down Snot, then it's taking that away quite easily. If I lay it on top of the really fine strands of the UHU glue, to be honest with you, that's quite surprising. It is very much bending rather than snapping and breaking away. I expected it just to shatter and go straight through, but no, it's holding it quite nicely. It's still a lot more fragile than the thicker Dirty Down Gore, but it's not completely trashed. So there you go, Dirty Down Gore versus UHU glue. Two very different products, two very different effects, and it is very much down to you to decide what effects and the properties that you need for you and your project. So I have put some links down in the description if you want to check the products out for yourselves and most up-to-date pricing wherever you are in the world. And I hope that really answered your questions. Now, as I'm playing with this stuff, my brain is kicking off with all sorts of ideas. So if you have any ideas of what you would like me to test with this stuff, or if you have any ideas of how you can use it, then please let me know down in the comments. And I may well take some of those ideas and test them out in the next videos. If you enjoyed that, you found that useful, please hit the like button. And if you are new here, then please hit subscribe for more content like this. And I will see you on the next project.